Hello, I'm Susan Kessel. I'm volunteer director of the Fairfield Art Association, and we're talking with Mark Shafer, who is
I'm the curator / director of the Carnegie Historical Museum.
And also a wonderful artist.
Thank you, thank you.
And we're here to talk about Lee Gobble and his collection of items and family related to Fairfield and Jefferson County.
Yes. And my pride and joy is the courthouse bustier that we designed in Lee's honor back, 2009? My Fairfield ladies.
Yes.
Anybody that wanted to got a bust or a torso from a store mannequin torso. And my my museum, what do you call her, intern, Ashley Smith, now Ashley Titus, helped me build this. And it was in tribute to Lee, helping to get the steeple back on the courthouse. And you can't see it from where the camera is right now, but there's a like a decorative pin at her throat.
Cameo.
It's like Lee Gobble is the cameo. And what I did, I just took a photocopy of the portrait I did of him for the Entrepreneurs Hall of Fame and made it into a cameo. That's a Shackley multiple vitamin bottle cap and cheap beads we got someplace at Walmart maybe.
So I love this piece when Mark brought it to our Art Association art exhibit downtown. And you can see here the courthouse with its steeple, which was blown off in the 1940s. And Lee was responsible for doing the fundraising, coming up with the idea of placing that steeple back on the courthouse.
And he had promised his dad that he would get the steeple back on the courthouse someday.
So he kept his promises.
Yep, that's cool.
And
excuse me, and these are enlargements of postcards from Lee's extensive collection of historic images from the community.
There are a lot of items in this Carnegie Museum area that were donated from Lee Gobble, and we'll go through and list a few of them and why he's relative to Fairfield and all the connections.
That's about 5 to 7 years before Lee passed, museum board president Gene Ludke and I were invited over to Lee's house, and he gave us the full tour, and we made a list of all the things that he wanted to come to the museum. So everything from Lee jean belt buckles and Kewpie dolls with little Lee coveralls on, to pictures from World War II that he had taken with his camera, including the Hart Schaffner and Marx welcomes you to Paris sign that somehow he got hung above this boulevard before the troops marched in and got in big trouble for.
Lee had a way of getting himself involved in so many things. Coco Chanel. And,
he had lunch with Coco Chanel. Scott Jordan told me that Lee invited him to come along to have lunch with Coco Chanel, the dress designer. And I guess she took a big puff on her cigarette and turned to her assistant and asked why she was having lunch with these GIs. And Lee perked up and said, well, excuse me, or he might have said, pardonnez-moi, I don't know. Anyway, he said, you're part of the reason, or I'm part of the reason you're still in business. He had this little thing going with perfume. He was selling perfumes to the officers and the enlisted men. And we have some French perfume that belonged to his mother, and I'm thinking probably that's part of his little business venture.
So Lee was everywhere doing everything, and we have to recognize him.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at this case here. There are a lot of things in here, and maybe our camera can scan as you're describing some of these.
Yeah, basically we made enlargements to the postcards so that they could be seen more easily. And then I've peppered little artifacts from Lee's collection. And of course he collected turkeys, playing off the name Gobble, Gobble, Gobble. This turkey ain't done yet. But we have everything from the Dream Motel in the 40s to the Bonneville Cabin to the State Centennial in 1946. We have silver spoons with engraved images of local landmarks. That one right there, I think, is the courthouse in the bowl of the spoon. Little turkey figurines. It just goes on and on.
Lee had a tremendous collection of many things, postcards, information on local people.
And we inherited those files.
Oh dear.
And he kept everything. Some of the files were those little notepads from First National Bank, the little green oblong strips. And he did research on like advertising slogans and so forth that used turkey imagery, or the word gobble, or the syllable Lee. And so these handwritten notes saying wonderfully, cordially, anything Lee.
So Lee developed a relationship to everything Fairfield through the years and supported and became a part of it in one way or another.
And then in the center column here of the gallery is a part of Lee's turkey collection. And that's the actual little etagere that he had. It was the partition between his dining area, the kitchen, and the living room. And I wish we had photographed it before we packed everything away. Who knows if that's where the things actually were. But some of the things like the turkey brand coffee tin appear in old photographs of his store. He had lots of interesting things in his store as part of the displays.
And his store, the family store, was founded in 1853 in Abingdon, Iowa.
And then the story is that Mrs. Gobble wanted better education opportunities for her children, so they moved to Fairfield to be near big city schools. And then, of course, Parsons College was part of the deal.
Let's flip over here to this section. This is all memorabilia from Lee.
Yes.
Everything in this case. He filled a lot of this area of the Carnegie Museum.
He had an ongoing love affair with his golf cart.
Yes.
And anything related to golf.
He lived on the fifth hole of the Fairfield Golf and Country Club course. And the Fairfield Golf and Country Club was the first golf course
West of the Mississippi.
West of the Mississippi.
Now there's another contender in Burlington, but there's a discrepancy in how you define terms. I think it was a person's private golf course.
Right.
This was the first golf, like country club type deal.
And here we can see Lee Gobble's old golf clubs. I remember decorating his home for the house tour at Christmas time, and we had ribbons and bows tied all over these and hung on his walls. And behind you can see the first golf and country club was very important to Lee, and he was always a member and drove the kids around on his golf cart.
And of course he had his Le Turkey license plate.
License plate. Oh, that's his store employees.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
That's 1965. And that's why when people say, like the image on the statue, like people that didn't know him in 65 don't realize how round his face was when he was young. And like you were saying over at the Civic Center, one of the challenges for Chris to capture a likeness was, what era do you focus on?
He had a lot of photographs to base the sculpture on, and going through all those years and
Because he was never a heavy
changing.
man, but he had a fleshy, round face. And then in later years, his face became thinner.
So he had a lot of employees, 4 or 5.
And that's his father, Bruce, on the right, on the front.
16 of them.
And the Kessel girls were all
Oh yes,
were
we're always there.
long-standing employees.
He also, because of his retail business, had a huge tie collection, bow tie, and we have been using those to sell and fundraise for this project, for the sculpture project.
Oh, and the top shelf is a nice picture of Lee all decked out in his generous mustache and straw hat.
He was quite the man about town.
Oh, yes.
And then over here, all the Parsons memorabilia, because he was on the board of directors.
Yes.
Parsons.
And over on the center post, before I forget, is a picture of the old family. It'd be on the other side. A picture of the family business in Abingdon. That's a picture that was done by Maynard Goff, taken from an old photograph that Lee had. And I don't know when that building was built. I don't know when it was torn down. But Grandpa Gobble came to Jefferson County in 1853, I think.
So their family has been active in the Fairfield community ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Always the marketer for Fairfield in every way. He was a big supporter of the Fairfield sports, sold these seat cushions, and then went on to say that it supported Fairfield, Cardinal, Fox Valley, Harmony, Pekin, and Van Buren sports teams. He was always out there promoting and relating to the area.
I don't think he personally was ever an athlete. His dad was a
Basketball?
very good football player.
Somebody played basketball. Maybe I saw him in a basketball uniform.
That could be.
He might not have been very good, but he tried.
And then Gene Lutke, who used to work at the Ledger in charge of advertising, he designed that Gobble, Gobble, Gobble image.
Behind us, we have Shriner paintings.
Pat Shriner.
Pat Shriner, which I'm an artist. I've always coveted a Shriner painting, and I finally got one.
Oh,
but
good.
these were all in his home. Mm-hmm. So he obviously...
He was Shriner's first cousin. And I forget, maybe it was his mother's, I don't know. I can't remember the relationship. But the still life with the carnations over by the big bed was a wedding present to Bruce and Queenie when they were married in 1907-ish, I think.
So another huge connection to Jefferson County, because Shriner went on to be a very well-known artist.
Mm-hmm. He eventually moved to California and died there in early 1940s. The portrait on the south wall behind the hurricane lamp is the Shriner portrait done from life of T.W. Gobble, who was the great-grandfather that settled Jefferson County. He came here from Virginia in the 1850s. I mean, he's a fairly late comer.
Well,
he wasn't here in 38 or 39, but...
It just goes to show that there are
country.
So many ties with the Gobble family to this community that it's all important that we're doing this sculpture.
And that portrait hung above Lee's fireplace in his home. It's really a very fine image. The other paintings by Shriner, a lot of them were done in Europe when he was sent abroad by some local families, the Lamsons, I think. The Loudons, I think, helped him. But they saw his talent. They sent him abroad to study. And so we have some of his pictures that he did in Ireland, I know. And then the picture on the far end is the landscape of what's called, what is it? It's the hill, the steep hill. Greased Lightning.
Greased Lightning. That is a famous hill for paintings. I think John Preston has done that one.
It's Greased Lightning, probably about 1905. My grandfather, who was born in 1892, said that a true test of an automobile back in the teens was if it could make it up Greased Lightning on a muddy afternoon, it was a good automobile. And he and his brother tried out their new Indian motorcycle on that hill, and he gunned it, and they did a wheelie and flipped over into the mud because it was so steep. So yeah, that's a well-known local landmark.
Yes, it is, for sledding and everything else.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a military uniform. The last time I saw this, Lee was wearing it.
Yep. So he was stationed in Paris. Oh darn. And so I'd like to know how that happened. It can't have just been a coincidence. Who knows? Anyway, Lee knew how to win friends and influence people. Those are his binoculars, his service bars and buttons and so forth, and then the uniform itself.
Lee was very proud of this uniform, that he could still fit in it.
Yes.
And he would go to every single Veterans Day service and on the Central Park or the Fairfield High School.
And the photograph of him behind the binoculars is, shall we call it an informal shot
Yes.
of him utilizing a public facility. But for those of you that think the sculpture has too big of a forehead, he's got a
You
big
can
forehead.
see his forehead.
And
That's
I
a
never
great
thought
shot.
about that. I never
Yeah.
thought about that when he was alive. I just never thought about his forehead. He was just a big person, a big presence, I should say. He wasn't a big man, but he was just a large presence.
Let's do a shot of the entrepreneur portrait that Mark has done of Lee Gobble for the Entrepreneur Hall of Fame. This was the very first portrait and entry into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think I did 7.
And Lee Gobble was the very first, and you can see the portrait of his grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
And then the couple to the right is his grandparents, and the wallpaper has their store between them and great-grandpa. And Lee's holding his card that says, "This turkey ain't done yet, GGG."
Which will also be on the sculpture.
And that's actually his handwriting, which I traced over and strengthened to use for the painting. There are 19 turkeys in the painting. The medallion on the fireplace mantle, the actual mantle had like a classical, like mythological scene with a goddess and some cupids and stuff. So what I did is I took a photo of him on his golf cart for one of the centennial parades. Ken Rowe, a local high school graduate and now a sculptor.
And also involved in this
Yes,
project, one of
that's
the
right.
sculptors with Chris Bennett.
Anyway, Ken, when he was a kid, adapted Lee's golf cart to look like a giant turkey. So that is a bronze medallion that
And he
alludes
wrote
to
it,
that.
he drove it in the parade.
Yes.
So what's important to me about this Portrait Entrepreneur Hall of Fame is that a lot of elements and the colorfulness of this is going to be translated by you
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
into the ties. The base of the sculpture is going to fan out, made out of ties, like a turkey, and it will be the base of the sculpture, and a lot of the elements will be translated into tile, and even more than this.
And we'll see if I can pull it off. The plan is to do a stylized turkey feather. So when you're looking straight on to the statue, you'll see this fanned out tail. But then when you get down to behind the statue and look down, each of those tail feathers is going to be like a local landmark or an important person or event in Lee's life. So we have a few clothing items that belong to Lee's family. The dress there, we think belonged to his great-grandmother. It's 1890-ish. And then the little sailor suit was Lee's when he was 9 years old. And I forget how many buttons. You have to go through like, I think at least 10 buttons. Can you imagine a 9-year-old boy having to
wear that
answer
and be good?
and answer nature's call in time? Anyway, and that's an old mannequin, and we need to get some arms on it. But I think it's charming that we have that little sailor suit. And then on the display case, we have a little Kewpie Doll. It's a display item that Lee had kept. And he told me that his dad, Bruce, had enough of those Lee Kewpie Dolls to field a football team. And he had 2 teams, one for one window at the store and one for the other. So whenever there was a big Iowa Wesleyan Parsons College game, the ladies, the seamstresses at the store and the alterations department, they'd made little uniforms for whatever team was being celebrated, and that would be the store display.
So many stories
Yeah.
to collect and put in this booklet about Lee and his relationship to all the things of our county, the era, the Loudon, the Charter Oak wagons, the...
And you think about him, all those games at Kinnick Stadium, and Lee Gobble knew Niall Kinnick. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is.
So Niall Kinnick, Coco Chanel, I'm sure we could make a list of the famous people that Lee knew. I mean, he was a favorite of the Des Moines Register, like
Yes.
Chuck was Offenberger.
Yes, he would carry on correspondence with Chuck a lot throughout the years.
And he kept in touch with all of his old Parsons College buddies. He was kind of a father figure, I think, for a lot of these Parsons kids that were here from the East Coast. And he would mentor them and, get them out of scrapes and go to their parties, I'm sure.
Here we have more items donated by Lee Gobble to the Carnegie Museum. These are
They're like little dumbbells.
dumbbells, these?
Yes, and those are called Indian clubs. They're for isometric exercises.
You're kidding me.
These are from the Parsons College Athletic Department. That's what athletes would have used to exercise in 1910 or so.
And here, the famous typewriter. I received many typewritten notes and postcards from Lee. Even after he moved away, he sent me some. He would move away for the winter is all. But he was famous for sending out cards and notes to people he didn't even know. And I'm guessing that these files that were from him, I heard that he kept files on so many people.
There were boxes and boxes and boxes.
I'm afraid I probably was in there.
We don't know yet. We haven't gone through everything.
He would want to know when some little girl was racing or doing something so that he could send a congratulation card, or if the family was needy, he would make donations, buy them a bicycle. Lee was always in the forefront of caring and taking care of the Fairfield community.
And he would take some of his antique postcards and have them reproduced. And sometimes he would send them anonymously.
Yes.
My wife got a couple that were, let's say, ornery.
Yes.
I mean, they weren't bad. I mean, there was nothing you could arrest him for, but they were suggestive, maybe.
And
but he liked to flirt, and so he flirted with postcards.
Yes, he did a lot of things, and we tried to capture the spirit and fun person in the sculpture that was Lee Gobble. All of his he was very eccentric, the things he did, and we wanted to capture them. And I'm sure we'll even capture more in the booklet that we're going to create, and maybe have a treasure hunt. We're going to have the schools come to this museum and learn about Lee Gobble and why he's in a sculpture in front of the Arts and Convention Center, learn about the history of Fairfield and parts of Iowa, whether it's art or the industries of Fairfield, the first golf and country club, the hospital that was built in Fairfield.
And he put clothes on the back of everybody. Farmers would go to the basement to buy their bib overalls, and the man about town at Parsons College would get his fancy duds there. So he clothed a lot of bodies.
So we'll be keeping Lee Gobble alive in Fairfield with his sculpture.
Yes.
Thank you.